Hello there and welcome to Black Jackal Gaming. Today we're going to look how to play Imperial Fists in the Anvil Siege Force detachment. So this detachment is all about ranged combat and it's really focusing on remaining stationary and choosing your targets. The enhancements are a little bit pricey and often not that strong, but they do have some powerful stratagems to go along with. So the big question is, how can you remain stationary in the game and still score enough points to win? So the rules that you're going to be using for this detachment, the detachment rule is quite strong, but it is a little bit on the limited side. So what it allows you to do, you gain the heavy keyword on ranged weapons, and if your weapon already has the heavy keyword, then you gain +1 to wound as well when you're stationary. So this is very good. You get +1 to hit and +1 to wound, but you do need to remain stationary. For the enhancements, there's a couple that you can look into. The first being Stoic Defender. This gives you a 6+ feel no pain when you're within range of an objective marker. And if you do become battle shocked, your OC is only halved rather than going to 0. So this is quite nice. So if you are OC 1, it will put you down to 0.5 and that's automatically rounded up so you remain on OC 1. So you will never lose an objective based on having 0 objective control. Then there's Architect of War. This grants all your ranged weapons the ignores cover ability, although it is slightly on the pricey side at 25 points. Looking at the main stratagems you're going to utilize, you got Rigid Discipline. This allows you to fall back 6 inches after the fight phase, but you can only do this if you're going to end your movement wholly within your deployment zone, or you're going to finish your movement within range of an objective marker. There's Battle Drill Recall, which is a very strong stratagem. So you gain the Sustain Hits 1 keyword on your ranged weapons, and if you remain stationary, you also gain Critical Hits 5+, which is very nice. So if you remain stationary, especially if it's a heavy keyword weapon, you're going to have +1 to hit, Sustain Hits 1 on 5+, and then you're going to get +1 to wound as well, which is very nice. And if you do have any other keywords attached to a leader, such as maybe a Lethal Hit, you're going to go those on a 5+ as well. Then you've got Hail of Vengeance. So this is for your opponent's shooting phase. If the unit that's been targeted has lost 1 model or more, this unit can shoot back as if it's your shooting phase, but it can only target this unit, and it can only target if it's an eligible unit to target as well. Then we have Not One Backward Step. This doubles the objective control of the unit within range of an objective marker, but the unit must remain stationary to do so. As well as this, you do have the core stratagems being Grenades, Overwatch and Tank Shock, the ones that you really want to look into. They've recently been nerfed, so they're not quite as effective as they were, but you still get a lot of play and value out of them. So it's something you should be considering every turn of the game. We'll take a look at the leaders that we should lean into utilizing during our game. So first up, we got the Standard Captain. He has an ability where once per battle he can gain 3+ to his attacks for his melee weapons. He will also gain Devastating Wounds, which is very nice. He'll get -1 CP to stratagems for the unit that he's leading. You no longer get the stratagem for free, and you can't reuse a stratagem that's already been used, so it has seen a nerf recently. Then we've got the Captain of Full Boss Armor. He gets to pre-game redeploy 3 units. Now this is before you find out who goes first, and again he gets the -1 CP to stratagems used for the unit. Then we've got the Lieutenant. He grants lethal hits and the ability to fall back and still shoot. The Librarian, which grants a 4+ invulnerable save to the unit, as well as a Feel No Pain 4+ against psychic attacks. Then you got Donath the Lysander, who is an epic hero. He grants -1 to wound to the unit he's leading if the strength of the weapon is higher than the toughness of the unit. Now the unit is toughness 5 because they are Terminators. And also once per battle, he can give himself a 2+ invulnerable save, which is very nice. The core supporting units you want to lean into to get the best out of your army. These are the guys that are going to give you a couple of buffs along the way. First up, we have the Incursors, who I think are an underutilized unit. They're going to allow you to negate -1s that the enemy can give to you, as well as if you have to move and reposition your army, it's going to negate the fact that you're losing the heavy keyword, because they can target 1 unit that they successfully hit, and the rest of your army get +1 to hit when targeting this unit, which is very nice. They also come with a once a game Haywire Mine. This allows you on a 2+ to target a unit that's finished movement within 3 inches of you. And on the 2+ you do D3 mortal wounds. And if it's a vehicle unit, you do 2D3, which is a very nice little buff to have. Next we have the lieutenant with the combi weapon. They get to select an objective at the start of the game, and this is a priority objective. And what this allows you to do, you get to reroll wound rolls of 1 when targeting enemy units that are within range of the objective marker. So this is essentially making generally your Oath of the Moment target a little bit more efficient, because you will have probably the objective in the middle of the board, or maybe your opponent's home objective if you feel you can take that. And it just gives you the extra ability to remove units from this objective marker. Then we have infiltrators. They come with a standard 12-inch bubble to help prevent deep strikes coming in, to keep you a little bit safe, stop those long-range charges coming from deep strike. As well as there's some armies in the game and some units that allow them to come in much closer than the standard 9 inches, so it stops them from taking objectives from you. You can generally use these guys to hold your home objective, and they do come with a heavy keyword as well, which is quite useful. Then we've got the humble intercessors. Now these will be quite useful because they do come with a heavy keyword, so you will get that +1 to hit and +1 to wound when stationary. But if you do need to move, and if you do need to move rapidly, they do have the assault keyword as well, so they will still be able to fire their bolters. And as well as this, their ability allows them to make objectives sticky, so when they leave them, once they've gained control of them, they will remain within your control until the enemy takes it. So we've had some of the support units we can look at, and now the real damage dealers that we can lean into. The Gladiator Lancer is one. This unit has a built-in reroll to hit, wound and damage, which is very nice, especially when it's coming equipped with those 2 high strength, high damage, high AP shots from its turret. That being the heavy laser destroyer. It also comes with the heavy keyword, so you get that +1 to hit and +1 to wound when stationary. You've also got a 72-inch range, so when you've got these 2 shots coming in with the +1 to wound, you're essentially wounding almost everything in the game on a +2. And then they're very tough, because with their high strength, because when they have a strength of 14, it essentially means that everything in the game they're already wounding on a 3 pretty much. With that +1 to wound puts them on 2, so to have a hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s with a reroll built into hit, wound and damage, you're pretty much guaranteed to be able to get your damage through to the target that you want to hit. With it being 2 shots and D6 +3 damage, you can do a lot of damage with these guys. And then we have the Eliminators. They have the heavy keyword on both the sniper and las fusel, so you have the option of leaning into the precision and hoping to get those devastating wounds, or going for the las fusel, which are basically baby las cannons, and so you'll be hitting on those 2s and wounded on 2s as well for a lot of the units in the game, and the ones that you aren't, you'll be wounded on 3s. They do also have the ability to move after shooting if you give the carbine to the sergeant. And if you do opt for the bolt rifle, they get devastating wounds on a roll of a 6 when stationary. This is only with the sniper though, but it can come in handy quite often, especially if you hit on 2s. But if you really want to lean into this, you probably need a couple more units for them, so you're most likely going to take the las fusel anyway. Then we have Hellblasters with a lieutenant. They have the heavy keyword as well, so they can really utilize the detachment rule. And they're really good if you use the battle drill recall strat with them as well, because they'll get sustained hit 1. And if you remain stationary, which you want to, because you want to get that +1 to hit, +1 to wound with them, you'll be critically hitting on a 5 for sustained hits 1, and with the lieutenant, you could get lethal hits as well. So you're going to do a lot of damage with these guys. So over to our units that we are going to utilize to score as points in the game to let us win. A lot of our army is really based on being stationary, because that's where a lot of the rules come into play. So we do need some units that are going to be focused on movement to try and utilize the ability to score points, as well as preventing the opponent just from relying on us staying still and not engaging with us and scoring their own points. So scouts are still quite cheap, even though they've had a couple of point increases. They do have the infiltrators keywords, so they can set up in no man's land, and they have a scouts pre-game move as well, which is quite nice. Now you can either utilize these to take your early objectives or score your secondaries, because they've got a lot of pre-game movement. But you could also use them to move block and zone out the middle of the board to stop yourself getting tied up in combat, because even though you want to move around early game, you really want to be utilizing the detachment rule, and you don't want to be in the position where you're constantly having to either shoot into combat with any vehicles whilst you're in engagement range, or potentially not being able to shoot and having to fall back anyway. Then we have the Assault Intercessor jump packs. These guys are great and they're really cheap. They have the Deep Strike keyword, so they can come in from reserve. But if you don't choose to bring them in from reserve, they're fast and can fly anyway, so they can get around the board. They've got really good mortal wound ability, which helps them clear off units off of an objective. And as well as that, you can take potentially a Power Fist or Thunderhammer on the Sergeant. As well as that, you can have 2 Plasma Pistols in the unit, so they can do a little bit of damage as well. Terminator Squads are a good one to use. They do have the Teleport Homer, so they can rapid ingress for free, which is really nice. And if you put them on an objective with Lysander, they're going to be on a 2+4+, and almost everything in the game is going to be -1 to wound them, because they're going to be targeted mostly with stronger weapons to try and push through their T5 3-wound bodies. Next we have Outriders. I think these look quite interesting for the Anvil Siege Force. They're not going to do much damage, but they do have a lot of movement with the 12-inch movement, and they got the turbo boost, which gives them the automatic 6-inch movement. 6-inch movement. So this allows them to get around the board, especially early games, and help you score points. Being T5, it's really going to help them stay alive, as well as the multiple wounds they have. And they're also not terrible in combat if you're going into T3 bodies. Now, they're not going to do an awful lot, but they are going to do enough damage to be able to tire them up. And then when it comes to fall and back as well, you do have a lot of movement to fall back in the direction that you want to. These can be good at either early or late game. Just move them up the board, keeping them in cover and getting things like behind enemy lines or engage on all fronts. And for the price point T5 on wound, they're not actually too bad at the moment. We then have Vanguard Veterans. I quite like the idea of giving these guys Storm Shield, so it puts them a 3-up, 4-up, so they're quite hard to take out. And you'd just be focused on move them around the board and scoring as much points as possible. You're not giving them a gun at all, you are just keeping them alive and firing them around the board. They can deep strike as well, so they can come in from turn 2 onwards. It's going to be very hard to remove these guys from the field, and you are just going to be bouncing around, making sure you're scoring those secondaries where you can, forcing your opponents to either come and deal with them, and if they do that, then it's going to leave you in a position where you can stay still and target the units that are coming to take these guys out. And what strategies do we want to use when playing Imperial Fists? So early game mobility is going to be key. You really want to limit the amount of positioning you do throughout the game. So you want to be setting up your firing lanes and really deciding early on the key units, where they're going to move, how they're going to move, and trying to point out which turns that they're going to remain stationary to try and do the damage. You want to really be hitting these firing lanes that you've set up as early as possible. And you want to be using your mobile units to score as much points as possible, because you want to force your opponent to not play an inactive game. You want them to actually have to come out and deal with you and face you, because if you're scoring lots of points, then they have to try and prevent that, and to do so means they have to enter firing lanes. You really want to be utilizing the heavy keyword as efficiently as possible. Target priority is key, but at the same time, you don't want to be leaning into the heavy keyword if there's a better option for you. You don't want to be remaining stationary to get +1 to hit and wound on a Lancer and going into a squad of Guardsmen. You will be better off moving to target a heavier option and losing the heavy keyword. So it's trying to prioritize when it's important to stay stationary and use the heavy keyword, and when you can move and still be effective. So some tactics you can use during the game. The full boss captain's ability to reposition 3 infantry units is quite nice. This is really going to be based on how you deploy the game, how you want to bait deployment for your opponents, because you do this before you find out who goes first. So when you're deploying, you really want to set up in a way that it maybe makes your opponent not set up in an efficient manner, or they're a bit heavy on one side. Because you cannot really use this ability to then go super aggressive and reposition them. You really want to do this to put them in a position where your opponent's going to react to them, then you can move them elsewhere, because you really want to be utilizing the heavy keyword on these guys from turn 1 onwards. If you want to be looking at moving your Hellblasters or your Eliminators, even if it's something like your Intercessors, if you've got multiple objectives in your own deployment zone, where you can move them around to decide which one's going to be sticky and which flank you're going to aim for. If you are taking Vanguard veterans and jump pack intercessors, there is the possibility of not putting them into the reserves and starting them actually on the field, and you'll be looking at possibly repositioning these early game. So you might put them in a position where it looks like they're going to be there for a melee threat, and then you do redeploy them down a narrow channel where they're not going to be targeted, there's plenty of terrain, and they can just move down the channel to score points and remain largely unmolested for the first turn or two, where they're just there scoring victory points. The key is really to focus on mobility where possible in the early turns, because you want to be setting up to use heavy. You don't want to be constantly repositioning to have the shot here or there. You want to be setting up your firing lane so you can do damage. You've also got the ability to use the incurses to give the lancers +1 to hit. So if they do have to move early on, you want to use your incurses not as a damage dealing unit, but a unit where you target a key enemy unit where you want that +1 to hit. This really allows some of your other units to move early game on and not lose all the benefits of the detachment rule. Scouts are going to be really important for screening out your units. We want to not use all these guys up early on, because we do want to score them points. We do want to contest objectives with them early game. We do want to have the ability to do actions and move into the enemy's deployment zone. But we do also want to make sure that we don't get tied up in combat, which is going to prevent us from using our rules. So we want to line these up where they can be utilized as action monkeys, but they are going to protect us at the same time, because if we can't shoot, the detachment is dead, and it's not a detachment we should use if we're looking to be tied up often in the game. We want to really move into mid-table early on and create firing lanes to the objectives. We want to look at the choke points that can be created by the terrains. You want to really focus on how your opponent is going to move through the terrain, move around the terrain based on what they have, and the key parts of the table that they need to engage with. And these are where you want to focus your firing lanes on. The intercessors with their sticky objectives are really good at sticking your home objectives, especially if your opponent doesn't have any deep strikes or any ability to get behind you. You can then move them on and really push up the pressure and start restricting their space. You've also got the infiltrators here who can block out deep strikes. So if you've got one home objective, you can just put these on and they're going to remain relatively safe, especially if there's terrain nearby where they can get out of line of sight, as well as creating that bubble where no one can drop onto it. The lancers have enough range that they don't actually have to do a lot of movement based on what the terrain layout is. You can set them up in multiple firing lanes and they're going to be active throughout a lot of the game whilst remaining safe at the same time. The Hellblast is a really key unit. You don't want to use these too early on and have them targeted. You want to soften up your opponent a little bit, get these off turn 1, and then get them in cover, set them up for a turn 3 being stationary with the +1 to hit, +1 to wound, and then having battle drill record to give them sustained hits 1 and lethal hits on a 5+, which is really nice. You can also give them a captain, which can be -1 CP on the strats, which is a good option to have. You want to look at bringing the Terminators with Lysander in from deep strike, especially if there's multiple mid-core objectives. You can bring them in for rapid ingress for free and come within 3 inches of your home and beacon. You can also use your home and beacon as a little bit of a bait, where you can put it somewhere where you don't really want to come in, but it's making your opponent deploy in a manner where they're going to focus on that area. You could also potentially add an Ancient to this, which gives you Stoic Defender if you give them the upgrades. Gives you the Feel No Pain 6+ when you're on an objective. So you're on a 2+, 4+, -1 to wound a lot of the time, as well as the Feel No Pain 6+. Your Ancient also gives you the additional objective control. And then you got your Vanguard veterans and your jump intercessors, as well as your Outriders. These should be moving constantly throughout the game. These want to be scoring your points. They want to be getting engaged on all fronts. They want to get behind enemy lines. They want to be doing actions. They want to be looking at the ways that you can score additional primary points, secondary points, and tertiary points. These guys are the ones that are going to bounce around and be making your opponent have to engage with you, because if you're maximizing your secondary points by using these guys just as to go around score point, they're going to have to come out to try and minimize their threat. And to do so, they're going to have to engage with you more and be active within your firing lanes for you to target. And the more they decide to engage with your army and engage with these units, it gives more space for other units to deep strike into. You do have the option of having a jump intercessor unit and using it as a missile to take out a key unit, or at least severely damage a key unit with their mortal wound ability. You can also give them a chaplain, which will give them +1 to wound, as well as another mortal wound ability on top. So you can, on average, come in and do 7, 8, 9 mortal wounds on the way in. If you've got the extra CP to do the grenade strat as well, you can get another 2 or 3 out of that. And then you've got your melee damage. So these guys can do a lot coming in and just being a massive disruptor. So the main aim is to be scoring points every turn. You want to look at being consistent with your point scoring. We're not scoring them all early on. We're not scoring them all late on. We are scoring a consistent amount of points in each turn. And that consistency puts pressure on your opponent as well, because they can see on the tabletop that you're going to score these points turn in, turn out, and they have to alter their tactics to deal with you. Because at the end of the day, if you're maximizing your points and you're getting up towards the 80s, 90s, and 100s, they've then got to prevent you from scoring points, because it's going to be more difficult for them to be accessing those higher point levels. Now we've got the important thing, the list. As always, this depends on your meta. It depends on what armies are in your local area, how your tournament's set up, the terrain. There's a lot of considerations to take, but these should be the units that you are considering high on your list of options to take. So you've got your HQ choices. You've got the captain, which is good because he gives you that -1 CP for your strats, and you will be using that for your battle drill recall. Your captain and foe boss is good for your redeploys at the start to try and apply pressure on your opponent and try and create a weakness in their deployment. You got your standard lieutenant, which is going to give you the lethal hit, which is going to be great with your hellblasters. Your combi lieutenant, not only does it give you that +1, the reroll of 1 to wound on your priority objective, he's also got scouts, infiltrate, and lone operative, so he's quite a powerful model on himself just to move around and score points. Then you do have the option of the ancient as well, so it gives you the additional C, as well as being a character that you can add an enhancement onto. Your infantry, you can look at your intercessors with their heavy and assault keyword, as well as the sticky objectives. Your infiltrators are creating the bubble, and they come with the heavy keyword as well. Your incursors are there to give you your +1 to hit into 1 target each turn. And then your jump intercessors and your scouts are there to give you a lot of mobility and a lot of points early on, as well as you've got some mortal wounds in your jump intercessors as well. Your elite infantry, you got your vanguard veterans, although we're not using them in an elite manner. We are using them as a mobile durable unit just to bounce around and score as points. Hellblaster is going to be there scoring as a lot of damage, especially if you're overcharging and you're getting those sustained hits and lethal hits on a 5+, and then you got that +1 to hit and the +1 to wound, and that's going into your oaths and moment target, and it's also getting the rerolls of 1s to wound. That's going to give you a lot of damage. You got your eliminators with your las fusels. They're going to just be popping along all game, hopefully in firing lanes where they don't have to move, giving you your hitting on 2s and then wounding most things on the game on 3s or 2s, which is very nice. Then your vehicles, you got your Gladiator Lancer. It packs a real punch, especially if it's stationary. It's going to be hitting on 2s, wounding everything in the game on 2s. It's got built-in reroll, so you don't even have to count on oaths a moment. You don't have to count on the priority objective to give you the rerolls of 1s to wound. And it's got 2 shots as well, which is very nice. It's got the D6 +3 damage and the high AP, so it's going to pack up an absolute punch. And then you got your Outriders again to give you a bit of melee threat into your T3 bodies. They can tie up T4 and T5 bodies because they are a bit more tough to take out. They will do a little bit of damage, but they do have a lot of that speed to get around the board as well. And they can do quite a bit of movement blocking as well, protecting your Lancers from people engaging with them, because they have quite large bases and they can take up a lot of space. They do have that turbo boost, so they are basically moving 18 inches a turn, which is very nice. So there you go, that's everything to consider. If you've got any thoughts, opinions, put them down below. Anything I missed, let me know. Anything I've said a load of nonsense, let me know that as well. Check out these other videos. If you like the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, consider taking a membership or popping along to Patreon. Take it easy, I'll see you next time.